So Susan,
Susan
and I, she's over there. Susan and I are going to run this session, and we're going to talk about some tools that we're using, Holos tools that we're using. Susan, do you need to introduce yourself? Are there people here who don't know you well enough yet?
I think there might be a couple. I think Jan and Daryl are new to me. Ian, I've seen in a couple sessions. But so I'm Susan Mannlein, and I work with Holos on a couple of clients initiatives that we're doing. I've been around and affiliated for a while, but this is, I think, the last 6 months or so are the first that I've been working quite more intimately with Neil and Mark and the team. And like many of you, I've worked in leadership, organizational development, teamwork. I also do diversity and inclusion work globally, and a lot of us here at the conference have worked together with some other clients for a number of years, probably 12 or more. And so I live and work in the US as well as, of course, globally, as we all do. And I've been lucky enough, though I live in Baltimore, Maryland, I've been lucky enough to be working out of Florida for the last, I don't know, 5 months or so. So that's kind of my silver lining of the pandemic, being much more closely connected with family right now. So that's a bit about me. Nice to see all of you here today.
Cool. Thank you, Susan. And I don't think I'm going to need to introduce myself. Ian's probably the only person who I haven't sort of had deep conversations with, but I have actually had a bit of a conversation with Ian. So I think we're probably good. So welcome. And I've got some slides, and we're going to have some polls later on as well. So let's start with slides. The objective, the thing that we're trying to achieve at Holos, the purpose, if you were to ask Victoria, our purpose, Holos's purpose, is sustained success. This is what we want to deliver. This is what we want to create. Sustained and sustainable success for organizations, for Holos, for all of us as individuals. Sustained success is the objective. Does that make sense? Does that need any explanation, or is that self-evident? The weird thing about it is that it doesn't appear to be self-evident for lots of other organizations, which I think is interesting, or governments for that matter. And the exam question is particularly, how do we intentionally create the kind of culture that leads to sustained success in a disrupted environment? So we are in a disrupted environment. We're going to stay in a disrupted environment for some time to come. How do we create sustained success in that disrupted environment? And just to go back over it again, since about 2000, depending on your sector, depending on your geography, we've moved into this VUCA environment where everything is disrupted because the technology innovation rate has overtaken the rate at which we learn. And then we've overlaid some other experiments onto that, such as the aging population and the need to decarbonize the economy. And then, of course, you can add other stuff onto that, like pandemic and space and things like that. So lots and lots of disruption going on. And then again, this model, which we've probably all seen far too many times this week, but this idea of conventional organizations prioritizing reliability. So if they could just deliver reliability, if they could just do what they said they were going to do reliably, that was the summit of ambition. And in that environment, the skill that you're going to require is management. And actually, you're going to find leadership annoying in that environment. How many of you have attempted to show leadership in conventional organizations and been discouraged from doing so? How many of you have had that experience? Yeah. So, but the reality in the post-conventional world is, if all you're doing is managing reliability, then you're effectively managing decline. So you've got to move into this post-conventional world where you create ownership and you create adaptability in organizations. Does that make sense? So what we've so then, okay, the next stage of that narrative is if there is a lever that you can pull to adjust performance in your organization, would you pull it? Or an organization, your client's organization? If there's a lever that you can pull, would you pull it? And I'm sure most of us are familiar with this piece of research, but the research says that 70% of team performance comes, or 70% of organizational performance derives from culture. And therefore, the biggest lever you've got to pull to adjust performance in an organization is to adjust the culture. And 70% of culture derives from leadership. So the biggest lever you've got to pull to adjust performance in any organization is leadership. And that's what we do. All of us work in that place of adjusting leadership in order to adjust culture, in order to create sustained success in a disrupted environment. Yeah, do we all agree with that? Is that a premise we can work with? So we've created some tools to help, and these are, so what we're going to talk about today is two tools: a post-conventional leadership 360 and a post-conventional team diagnostic. And the post-conventional bit is the important bit. So these are different, at least in my view. In my view, these are different from conventional 360s and team diagnostics because they focus on post-conventional behaviors rather than conventional behaviors. So they're not looking at things like reliability as much as they're looking at things like adaptability and change and disruption. So we're going to do a poll. We're going to do several polls today. So here's going to be our first poll, and I'm going to switch around, find the polling thing. I'm going to launch the poll. So the poll, let me just talk through the poll before you start answering it straight away. So can you see the poll? Yeah. Okay. So
yes.
The question here is about high performance teams. So when we think about high performance teams, what do we think are the most important factors in creating high performance teams? Someone's jumping in there already. So what do we think are the most important factors? You can take more than one answer. So the options we've got here: psychological safety. I think probably most of us understand that by now. A clear vision and objectives, a sense of ownership, great leadership, good prioritization, good delegation, clear roles and responsibilities, good decision making, and intentional culture development. So go ahead and choose which ones you think are important. So I think you probably get the point that all of them are important, but there were no ringers in there. But psychological safety, yes. I mean, anyone who's familiar with the Gallup research or the Google Project Aristotle work would know that psychological safety is the key underpinning for high performance teams. Then clarity of vision and objectives, but also clarity of roles. And then great, what have we got else? We've got ownership, that sense of ownership, very important. And then other stuff like great leadership. Interesting that comes lower. Prioritization, delegation, good decision making. So I think the interesting bits, the interesting bit for me here is the last one, intentional culture development. So we do a little great teams exercise at the beginning of a lot of our teams sessions. And we ask people, we ask them to identify their top team. It could be in sports, it could be a team that they've worked with, it could be any team that they know that they consider to be a high performance team. And we ask them to identify the things that they consider make for a high performance team. And these questions are based on those answers. The interesting thing is that we haven't yet had a team or a session where the team has identified that last point. So I say intentional culture development, but prioritizing spending time on their own development is what that point means. We haven't yet had a team who identified that as a key element of high performance teams. That should be quite shocking to you. Not a single team has identified the need for team development as a key critical factor in high performance teams. And that's what we do for a living, and they don't think it's important. which I think is quite interesting. But if you consider your own version of a high performance team, Mark might look at a sailing team, or someone else might look at a football team or a Formula One team or something. Actually those sports teams, pretty much all they do when they're not actually competing is train. That's what they're doing the whole of the time. And yet these business teams don't think of their own development as being a critical factor in high performance. Just an interesting point. Okay, so let me get back to the slides. So to help with all of this, we have developed this team diagnostic. Now this is a fully online team diagnostic. It asks about 60 questions. It takes a little bit of time to answer, and it gives you quite a lot of data down to quite granular levels. This is the highest level of data. It's split across those themes that we saw in that poll, or some of those themes. So psychological safety, structure and clarity, capacity and inclusion, reliability and adaptability, and impact and meaning. And those are all the key points from the Gallup research and the Project Aristotle research, as well as, I'm sure, our own experience of team development. So at the top level, you get this spider diagram, which gives you these scores. All of the questions are frequency based. So how often does the team do this? And so it's ranging from rarely to frequently, because any transformation that occurs, and again, I'm sure we all know this, but any transformation that occurs at any level in an organization, team level or organization level, it happens at the habit level. It's all about what habits people have. And so what we're doing here through the diagnostic is measuring the habits that people have, the ones that they actually, or the ones that they report anyway. So you can see this, this particular team, they scored well for caring in the psychological safety dimension. But they had pretty transactional relationships. They didn't actually connect personally with each other very often at all. They suffered with frustrating systems and processes which they didn't seek to fix. They were quite purpose driven. They were very operationally focused. So they weren't good at horizon scanning or looking at the future or thinking strategically. And you can see why if you look at the point under reliability and adaptability, where they're highly overloaded. So this team are so overloaded that they don't look up. They don't get to think strategically. And if we're thinking in terms of sustained success, if no one's looking up, if no one's looking out and at what the future might bring, you are creating a crash in the future by doing that. But what they're prioritizing massively is reliable delivery. You can see here. So they're very good at reliable delivery, and they do it at personal cost. But they're also highly collaborative. So they're good at collaborating, but they don't spend a lot of time getting to know each other or building the depth of their relationships with each other. And because of the nature of the organization they're in, they're very highly motivated. So highly motivated, willing to put in a lot of self-sacrifice to deliver reliably, don't fix the underlying problems of the systems and processes that they've got, and subsidize it by working really, really hard and unsustainably. So when we do this with teams, what we do is we don't actually interpret the data for them at all. We run a diagnostic debrief session where we give them the data, we teach them how to read the data, and then we ask them to interpret it and present back. So we do breakout groups where they interpret one section at a time. So psychological safety, 20 minutes to interpret that in small groups, come back, tell us what you got. And from that, we're able to identify the priorities, the development priorities for that team. And then we can turn that into a process. So I'm going to hand over to Susan So, well, let's just before I do actually, any questions or thoughts? Any questions about the tool itself and the development of the tool?
Yeah, Neil, this is Jan. A question, because you stressed the post-conventional underpinning of this tool. Would this work in a conventional organization, or is this beyond their comprehensive power?
So it is designed for conventional organizations to understand their readiness for post-conventional behaviors. Having said that, we do get feedback that people don't understand some of the questions. So, you know, I mean, and some of it may be to do with language, but I think quite often it's conceptual. So, you know, things like psychological safety. We had one piece of feedback from a respondent who said these questions are quite insulting because we can't change the situation we're in. These, you know, it's like the questions assume that we have agency and we don't. So I don't know why you're asking us.
Yeah, because I understand you can be too far from what you're trying to measure, and therefore kind of install kind of a frustration.
Yeah, so I think I mean, we are using it with conventional organizations and it does work. But as I say, there are individuals who struggle with it. It works. It does work, but there are individuals who struggle with it. But of course, that's data too.
Sure.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, Richard raised his hand. Richard Friend raised his hand.
Yeah, this is just a quick question about the tool itself. So this spider diagram where you have labeled the sort of higher and lower dimensions, are those labels built into the diagnostic, or are those sort of your interpretation?
They're a little slight mixture actually, but when the online version of this tool, when you roll over the spider diagram, the labels come up. You can see what the questions are relating to that. I can show you. It
doesn't actually say these labels.
No.
Yeah, it gives you the actual question related to those data points.
So it wouldn't say transactional relationships, for example.
No, it doesn't say transaction. That's not what it actually says. No, but I'll later on I'll show you a live version of a diagnostic. Rob, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just very quick. What's the best score that you've seen in the real world? I mean, have you seen this thing 100% all over the place? And yeah,
we've never seen 100% all over the place, but we're going to go through the leadership model. Actually, for teams, the high scores are not particularly high. So I don't think we've seen a team have a score of more than about 70%, 75% maybe. So that's, but did anyone go to Fidel's session on the first day? Yeah, so Fidel, as an individual leader, he scored about 90%. It was an extraordinarily high score. You know, for his one, the 360. Ian.
Hi, Neil. Hi. Yeah, quick question. So this is based on averages. It's not against any norm group that you've got in terms of data.
No, it's not. No, it's not based on any norm group. It's based on it's just percentage answers to their questions. As we do more of the diagnostics, of course, we're building up our own database of what a norm looks like.
Brilliant. Okay, and just interested in cultural differences and how the tool fits with that. And yeah, your thoughts on that and experience in terms of using it with mixed, diverse international groups.
Well, we are using it. We're only using it with mixed international groups, actually.
Okay.
I don't know really. I mean, it works. Yeah. I don't think. You know, I think again, as we get more data, we'll have more clarity on whether different national groups have different responses. But of course, with team diagnostic, which is already multinational, when the teams are already multinational, it's hard to pick out the national differences because they're all anonymous. We don't know who said what.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
I will. I'm going to show the live version a bit later, actually, but I'm going to hand over to Susan to talk about what we do next after we've done a diagnostic.
Thanks. And just in terms of usability, it's realistic in length. There's 66 total questions to that. They're pretty evenly divided among those different areas. And in terms of average scores, just talking to that pharmaceutical multinational that we've been working with, we've done about 10 different teams, I think, within that organization. And they've, I think, almost all average in the 60s somewhere. So that's kind of the scoring as well, going back to that question someone had earlier too. So in terms of the team effectiveness journey, what it looks like, Neil had already mentioned that coming out of the diagnostic being completed. And again, what you saw was the spider diagram, kind of highest level. If you hover over that with your mouse, you see the questions, not those kind of titles we created to encapsulate what those questions would be. You also have the bar graph level and then the pie chart level, which gives you the detail on what, you know, each individual in the team confidentially, how they responded to each question. So the percentages, of course, tell you what the team did overall, but you see individually what the team looked like. So you can see if there's some consensus on that question, or if it's an average that it's made up of a lot of disparate responses. So again, you get that information. But the team effectiveness journey now has just gone from my screen. Neil, you're going to share something else, or should I continue on with that?
There you go, it's back.
No worries. So the diagnostic session, of course, after meeting with the team leader individually on it first, then we do that diagnostic session that Neil mentioned, and I'll go into some detail on that in just a minute. But what we do then is we do kind of what we call a triage session to talk about, do you want to move forward with us, working with us in this process that I'll talk about, this 3-month process, which then has a continuation later. Do you want to, if you are at a high performing level, there's an option on your own within a client organization to get some team essentials, you know, resources to do some work on your own. Perhaps there's some deeper, more intensive work when they have a lot of opportunities in this team to work with us, and maybe the 3-month journey, as well as some coaching, some prescriptive coaching. So there's a couple opportunities at that point for the team together, of course, with their leader to decide upon. And then there's kind of a loop back to us. If the team decides, which most teams do so far in this organization, this one I'm speaking to move forward with us. And there's certainly other organizations we've worked with in team effectiveness. But month 1, the first workshop is this 1-day psychological safety session, which I'll detail for you in just a minute. But as we all know, this being the foundation for high performing teams, this is what all teams go through. And as we all know, of course, though there is kind of an agenda and already a design for it, each session is really individual for that team and based on not only the individuals, but based on what we know about their diagnostic and what we know about them so far. Based on the diagnostic results, we then, of course, would have already had this conversation ahead of time, but we've already identified a month 2 workshop for them. And folks, given the virtual nature of how we're working these days, these quote workshops that are 1 day in length are broken down into 2 individual sessions that are half days. And so moving forward, we'll continue the dialogue on how we want to continue, but we've actually found this has worked quite well, where it's kind of giving folks kind of this bite-sized content and interaction to work with. And of course, as we talked about, Neil already mentioned, wanting to create habits, giving some behaviors that they commit to at the end of each session. So instead of having 3 1-day sessions in the green journey, they've got 6 half days to commit to and to practice some behaviors to hopefully turn into some new habits in between. So month 2, again, based on the diagnostic results, the custom session for that team. And we have this architecture for each of these. Decision-making, prioritization, and delegation is the one that we do the most. I'll actually, can give you some more detail on that, but that's where we see most teams needing some more assistance and some needing, having some opportunities there. Leading in a challenging situation. If you went to Russell and Kate's session yesterday, Kate's with us right now, you got a chance to really get a wonderful taste of that. So that is a business simulation, kind of an interactive theater type of business simulation. And that's for teams really with some challenges or opportunities around conflict. And then influencing is another kind of just in development situation we have going on there, looking at Cialdini's work, looking at work coming out of Bill Torbert's area, looking at, again, using skills of influence, influencing mapping, those types of things, and then improving systems also just being developed, as we're seeing perhaps an opportunity for this as well, for some that are just coming into the team effectiveness journey. So that's work, again, month 2, workshop 2 is more custom based on each individual team and their diagnostic results. Month 3, the last workshop, is about planning and also about a team appreciation. So here we have, again, another business simulation. This one is custom. It is also very engaging. It gives teams a chance to look for business opportunities in a different way. Look for not only perhaps how others could be coming in and how marketplace conditions could be changing, but also how they could be driving some of those changes in this simulation. And then looking at, again, appreciations for each other. And so that is a really nice kind of wrap on this series. And then what they do is they kind of go away back to the workplace and deliver on their plan, the plan that they've come up with in this month 3 final workshop. We do a touch base about a month later with the team leader, with the HR leader as well. And then we kind of come back again 3 months later, where they've hopefully really been integrating the plan into their everyday business, implementing. We do a pulse check then, going back to that original diagnostic tool Neil just talked to you about, and reassess and say, where do we see some improvements? Where do we still see some opportunities? And then obviously moving forward from there. So what questions do you have for me on the team effectiveness journey post the diagnostic? Anything? Okay.
So it sounds, Susan, can I just check? It sounds like you have created, or you are creating, a series of like virtual teaching classes and tailoring it to, are you tailoring it to the team? How does it work in terms of the input that you have in your mind of what the team needs?
So thanks for asking, Karen. We've actually got some examples to share of the debrief session, which is going to be similar for all. And then session 1, which are going to be similar for all. So we do have designs in place already. And then we, for month 1 and 3, again, the designs are in place and all teams go through the same sessions with maybe some slight tweaks. For month 2, we've got those individual designs created and one is chosen depending on what that specific team needs. So let's go ahead to the next slide, Neil, and I'll give folks a taste of that. So here's a description of the diagnostic debrief session. So sustained success, the model Neil just talked you through, Russell and Kate talked about yesterday, and criticalities for post-conventional team effectiveness. So again, grounding people in that. That's kind of their first introduction to those concepts. So no matter whether they're a kind of conventional organization or a post-conventional one, really giving them that language and those aspirations if they are conventional, and the ability to really start to think about that. And for a lot of folks, you really see that on their face, and it's new information and it's very engaging for them. But then we define in plenary, as Neil had said, the 5 areas of the team diagnostic report. So we're giving them the data for the first time. We go into the breakouts, Neil had mentioned that, and we have them in their teams in smaller groups talk about, here are our results, what do you see, what do you think, what do you feel? Because again, they have their own snapshot about how they experience the team, but what they're doing now is seeing how others think and feel as well. And so they're going into breakouts throughout this session, talking about how they're seeing, how they're experiencing their overall team data, and what do they want to do about it. And so what they're doing then at the end is committing to some new individual behaviors in service of developing some new habits individually and as team members, and then committing to what they want to do moving forward as a team. So that's really kind of a slice of what the diagnostic debrief session for all teams looks like. And again, this is then, when that comes next is that triage session I mentioned, where they're determining if they want to move forward with us in this team effectiveness journey that we just went through, if they want to instead get some resources and self-service, something called Team Essentials with the one client we're working with. If instead they don't know what they want to do, they need to talk some more. And usually we've had one one client team come back to us a couple of times as they're trying to move with the team forward. And we've actually seen some folks, you know, Neil gave you a diagnostic report of some folks being so overwhelmed, so overworked. And I think some folks sometimes claim that as, oh, we're so busy right now, how do we fit something else in here? And then helping them to realize that, you know, I think Neil uses the metaphor of, help me out here, it's the woodcutter cutting down the forest.
The woodcutter who had so many trees to cut down that he didn't stop to sharpen his axe and just got slower and slower.
And so here we are, our axe sharpeners. We are us, right? So so we help folks to see again how working on your team, right, can be beneficial to clearing that forest.
And
So
Karen,
this is the diagnostic debrief.
Just as a further answer to your question, actually, the data that we're getting back from these diagnostics is disappointingly consistent. So psychological safety, decision-making and prioritization, make a plan. Yeah, I mean, I would love it to be more diverse and for us to have to work on different things. But in this particular organization, that's what they need. It may be different in other organizations.
And even as diverse as the teams are, right, whether they're medical or commercial or whatever they R&D, it's very consistent. So here's the design example for psychological safety, which is of course the first one that we work with. So a lot of verbiage here, but we're, again, the key points are here. We're striking the important balance between, as you all know, experiential learning and team working. So giving the team a chance to improve upon psychological safety and trust while we're working and talking about it, right? So it's plenary discussion as well as breakout groups. So we're doing experiential learning as well as kind of the education and the information around the subjects. They're talking about the quality of their own psychological safety, trust, vulnerability, and collaboration, while they're, of course, trying to increase that. We make the point that, of course, leadership is about being vulnerable, right? Because you need to be leading change. You need to be leading, right? To being able to be an authentic leader, be able to live and work in this post-conventional team and organization. So we're reinforcing and building upon what they learned in the diagnostic session, as well as, you know, not only about the results, but about, you know, what's important for post-conventional team working and sustained success both. And the idea here is for them to be more intentional about how they want to be and the culture they want to create. And along those lines, we conclude workshop 1, which again is 2 parts, 2 individual sessions, with their vision for culture and leadership as a team. So they work in groups on that. And again, each session concludes with, what are you willing to commit to? What are you willing to experiment with, which is terminology for their organization. But the point is trying something new. So that's an example of the first workshop. Any questions or comments on that? Neil, did you have something to add?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the striking things about doing these, doing the diagnostics and doing these workshops is that actually teams, generally speaking, are pretty complacent about their level of psychological safety. So if you ask them what their level, how they think it is, and they think, yeah, even after they've done the diagnostic, they think, yeah, no, it's okay. We don't really need to do this session on psychological safety, do we? Because we're good. And then you do the session on psychological safety, and they're like, oh, I see. That's what you mean by psychological safety. Okay, well, that's different. So it's really, really interesting that teams generally believe they're pretty good on psychological safety, and then they find out that there's a whole lot more opportunity than they realized. So I'd like to share with you an example of this is some feedback from a team leader.
So I thought I'd say something about the team effectiveness journey that we've been on with Holos as a leadership team. Really enjoyed it, learned a lot as a leadership team, really brought us together and helped us really develop a much stronger relationship. I think what we all learned was the real importance of being much more intentional about the culture we want to create in our organization. And what we've done is we've been really clear about 5 specific habits that we think if we can start to really, really drive in the way we operate, will help our organization be so much more effective in 2021. So thank you, Holos. It was a really good experience.
Thank you, Andy. So how are we doing? Ready for another poll?
Love a poll.
Love a poll. This one is about great leadership. So let's see what you think is required for great leadership. There we go. So self-mastery, clear vision, purpose-driven, Victoria would say that, empowering others, having time and bandwidth, the ability to inspire people, the willingness to be vulnerable, empathy, and trust. So what would you, where do you put your votes? Again, I think you can have as many votes as you want. What do you think is, where would you put priority? There we go. Okay. Interesting. So look at that. You see, you come up, you know the answers. So I did this poll with about 100 people in a keynote speech, and very few of them chose vulnerability. There you go. So you've put vulnerability at the top, vulnerability and trust at the top. As I say, this group of leaders I did this with, they I don't know where they put vulnerability, but it was nowhere near the top. It was quite low ranking, actually. Interesting that self-mastery is only 54%. I think I would rate self-mastery a bit higher. I think the other one is time and bandwidth. Again, we're seeing this with this particular client. Most of the leaders we're working with, they have no time to lead. So they actually spend, they're actually far too operational. If you ask them the question, what percentage of your time do you spend leading versus the percentage of time you spend being operational? They typically say 80% operational. And that's ridiculously out of kilter. 60-40, 50-50. People need to spend a lot more time leading and a lot less time being operational. What observations do you have from your answers?
I think that's a pretty accurate reflection. You know, the whole people are too busy to really do what needs done. You know, that whole piece about there's two modes to be in, either on the dance floor or on the balcony, and they're on the dance floor too much. Yeah. And there's not a lot of time on the balcony standing back and really thinking about where they're at and what's going on and what they need to do differently moving forwards to get better results. So and the whole vulnerability bit, I think is really interesting. I think there's still too much of needing to try and show up having all the answers. Yeah. And that's why the prioritization, delegation, and decision-making session for the team effectiveness is so common, because the problem is lack of bandwidth for both the leaders and for the teams. Yeah.
I think also in some organizations, I was working with a leader the other week, and I asked him, it's an international organization, I said, how are decisions made here? And because he was going around in circles, and he said, that's a really good question. It's actually in organizations that are trying to be more collaborative, it's like that gets really confused for people.
Yeah.
So just an observation. I wonder if the time and bandwidth thing is worse at the moment because of the blurring of home, and we live in the office now, and the pressure that people are feeling. I kind of wonder if that's just going to skew even and more to a difficult place.
I mean, certainly that's what people report.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Is worse. Well, which is ironic, because we're spending far less time sitting on trains and sitting in cars and sitting in planes. So it's interesting that people have even less bandwidth, even though they're not doing those activities which were relatively unproductive. Richard.
I know, but you can slope back to the office, can't you? It's easier to just kind of log in and get back into work at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
So two thoughts come to
mind. Oh, sorry, Richard, keep going.
Richard.
Two thoughts come to mind for me on this. One is this time related to time and bandwidth. One is there's part of me when I hear it, and I've heard this obviously for a long time, where I want to go frame it as an excuse. And I know that's not what comes out of my mouth, but that's my thought bubble. In the same way, when I hear, well, the culture won't let me, I'm thinking, well, who's the culture and what's that about? But one of the things I have noticed post-COVID, which feels different in some of the larger organizations that I work with, what I'm hearing, interestingly, is people who are in mid-levels are saying, I'm feeling underutilized right now. And that, the more senior leaders who are saying, I don't have time, I don't have bandwidth, are not even aware that the folks around them are feeling like, I'm not even sure what to do today. And so there's a disconnect on that.
No, I think there's a sort of super Oshry effect of going virtual, which is the leaders hoover up even more responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Kate, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I think Rob had his hand up first.
Yeah, I really paused on the inspiring one, because in many ways I thought, if I found people who were all the other ones, that would be inspiring to me. I'm not looking for a rally the troops every morning, speech. Just being human and a very balanced human. These are the kind of people I want to hang out with.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think there are people who would say they want a leader to be inspiring, but I agree. I think in a way, the job of the leader is not necessarily to have the vision or to have to be the author of the purpose, or to be the inspiring one. Their job is to ask the right questions, and if the inspiration is coming from somewhere else, that's fine. Yeah, I agree. But I mean, can be good, but not necessary. Yeah, Kate.
I think you've just addressed the point I was going to make, actually, Neil, which is I found that there's that distinction between vision and purpose, and I ticked purpose, but I didn't tick vision, because I think for a great leader, yes, it's good to know, your general sense of direction and the general purpose, but the vision surely is something that evolves as the group work. That would be my if it's set by one individual or one person, that's not a vision that everybody's going to buy into in terms of ownership, is it?
Well, so interestingly, the way that we start our decision-making process in the session 2 is with articulating the team's vision, because actually what you want to do is articulate it collectively, but you can't create ownership in an organization unless people have a basis on which to take decisions. And if people don't know where the organization is going, what basis are they taking decisions on? I
think there's also, isn't there, though, the danger that the vision becomes, as you said yourself, like the bumper sticker on the wall that everybody, signs up to, but nobody pays attention to, So maybe it's a case of just making sure it's more live than, something like that. Yeah.
Which is why articulating it collectively is so powerful. If the team articulates it, it's much more powerful than if any individual articulates it. Absolutely. Okay.
I just quickly, Peter Singer in his Fifth Discipline, he was basically saying, so long as everybody knows they have a vision and everybody else also has, you can see everybody else's vision, that's enough. And then you start the conversation of folding in the visions. Everybody, the organization is a hologram, and it's okay if everybody has different visions, so long as you know where the other people are going. So that's almost like playing a team game.
We would typically say, yes, it is okay for different teams to have different visions. It's appropriate for the finance team, for example, to have a different vision from the HR team, as long as they're all in service of a single sort of greater vision that the whole organization is pursuing. Next poll. Everybody loves a poll, I'm told. Next poll. So what holds us back from being a great leader? I don't know whether you want to answer this for yourself or maybe as a proxy for your clients, but what do you think holds people back from being a great leader? Totally. I think the biggest obstacle to leadership in any organization is vulnerability. And of course, that's related to psychological safety. But people don't step up and lead unless they feel safe or they're very courageous. And it's a balance between those two things. And then interesting. So time and bandwidth, yes, definitely gets in the way. Not good at empathy. Yeah, that gets in the way. Self-mastery, absolutely, which of course is what the whole leadership development thing it should be all about in the end. But not, as you say, not so much the clear vision or the clear purpose. Those are quite easy to come by. Not so much the knowledge and skill. I think there is some knowledge and skill, but no, and nothing. Yeah, nothing's really holding people back. It's interesting. One of the things I think that one confusion that people have is that they think leadership is an appointment, whereas in fact it's a choice. And so they're waiting for someone to tell them. That's the permission point here. They're waiting for someone to tell them that they're a leader when actually all they need to do is choose to lead.
So Neil, I'm quite surprised that permission and role and culture it came so low there. A lot of my coaching clients often say, actually, I'm not allowed to do this. You know, it's all good and well, but you know, I can't. Yeah, this sea is, but there's too many fish in this sea for me to make a difference.
Yeah. No, I think we don't quite know what frame people were answering from, do we? So if they were answering for themselves, then that's probably right. But I think you're absolutely right, Paola. In many organizations, leadership is discouraged. I mean, it's interesting that they say, oh, yes, we must do leadership. But when people actually start showing signs of leadership, they get all nervous. Okay, fantastic. So we've done all of that. I think this is Susan. This is Leadership 360.
Yeah, so here's an example. Yeah, of our Leadership 360, which is kind of a partner diagnostic to the team effective one. So the spider diagram looks similar from the layout, obviously. And the Leadership 360 has 4 areas instead of the 5 that we saw earlier. So context, cause, conditions, and team impact are the areas for the Leadership 360. It has a similar number of questions. It has 71. So again, it's realistic in terms of people being able to get it done, especially because this is a multi-rater, as the 360 suggests. So it's not something that people get too bogged down with, but they can easily complete it. And I know some people who are in this session have actually completed it as well. So as you see in context, you're looking here at horizon scanning as an example. And that's a great one to call out because it really is the first introduction for some people into different behaviors. So what that is asking people what that very question is, you know, are people horizon scanning, looking for what's coming, which is a key post-conventional behavior. And for a lot of folks, that very beginning question, the first, you know, introduction to the Leadership 360 is a completely different behavior for them, and as a rater of someone else for them as well. It's like, well, hold on, hold the phone. What are we talking about here? And so again, the strategic behavior of picking up your eyes from the day-to-day and scanning the horizon, right, toggling between, you know, the zoom lens and the wide angle lens of the camera and seeing what's coming, you know, around over the horizon, or what we call, you know, getting in the helicopter here at Holos. And so that's what that's talking about. Aligning stakeholders as well, aligning stakeholders to context there is what we're talking about in that other point there, that leader is more effective at doing. Sharing a vision as we transition into cause. So these all go in a clockwise direction here. Sharing a vision, because in cause we're talking about purpose, mission, and vision, something we were just discussing a minute ago when talking about leadership. So obviously some other points there, prioritization, not as effective for this team leader. So when this disruption occurs, we're not adjusting team strategies as effectively as we could here in pursuit of that vision. So that's what we're seeing perhaps a little bit in that point there. As we go to conditions, so condition is the area where we have almost half of the questions in the Leadership 360, because as you know, as we talked about just a minute ago, and as you all know, because of the work that you do, again, when you want to impact performance, culture is the biggest lever you can pull here. you know, again, half the questions in this Leadership 360 coming in this category here, because conditions is looking at culture, systems, symbols, those types of factors. So what you're seeing are questions around empathy, around sharing personal values, around leading with moral courage, those types of things. And so there's a couple highlights here, as you can see in this area. And then team impact, right? Is healthy conflict encouraged in our teams? Do we have trust and inclusion? So some other highlights in that area. And so those are the components of our Leadership 360. Any questions on this spider diagram view? And once again, this has the same type of picture in terms of the drill down or the drop down, where we have this as the initial view when you're in the online version. You have the bar graphs, and then you also have the pie charts, which give you that very detailed perspective on which each individual person rated for each question. Any questions?
Susan, are you using this alongside your, well, you do the Team 360. Is it for some leaders section I'd quite like to burrow a little bit more into what's going on? Or, I mean, how do you use these together?
So we've been using them actually. Neil, you want to go?
Well, we've been doing both. So you carry on, Susan. Yeah.
I was going to say we've been using.
Sorry.
Why don't you go ahead? Go ahead, Neil.
Put him on mute.
We're kind of the same this way. We tend to jump in on each other.
I know, it's fine.
Neil, would you like to say something?
I was going to say we're doing both. So with the particular big client we're doing, they're quite separate. But with other clients, we've done the 360 for the team and done the diagnostic, the 360 for the leader and the diagnostic for the team.
Fine.
Right.
And also we have this quote here is very common feedback. So you do a one-to-one debrief with people, and they are astonished at how much insight you have into them from the 360. Sorry, Susan, I'm going to shut up again.
No, you're doing a fantastic job. Well done. Yes, and we do have leaders who have done both, right? Where they're part of this leadership journey, this initiative that we've got, this staged cohort process where we use the Leadership 360, and then they decide they want to work with us and their team in the team effectiveness, and they are part of that process as well, and vice versa. So so yes, we do have individuals who have used both instruments as part of both.
As a chartered psychologist, I'd just like to say they both look fantastic. They really do look wonderful. And, I want to dive into the detail and find out, what's on all the little, the highs and the lows and all of that stuff. But it looks comprehensive. It looks well designed. It's easy to understand. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That means a lot. And then let's go ahead. I'm mindful of time. Let's go ahead to the next slide then, please, Neil. So obviously the 360 is oftentimes used in coaching in the context of a program and or one-on-one and or both. So the Leadership 360 Diagnostic Debrief, as you would imagine, folks, includes a one-to-one session between the leader and one of our senior consultants, faculty members. And so what we're looking at, is the alignment, as with any multi-rater type of tool. You're looking for alignment with self-rating and self-knowledge, as well as the leader's personal leadership ambition. So we talk to folks about what it is that they're looking to achieve, what is their leadership ambition, and how does this help align with that. We review the diagnostic areas we just covered for opportunities for them to build more effective habits. Also, I don't know if we've mentioned this today, but we do have the verbatim areas too. So there are verbatim or write-in areas at the conclusion of each of those sections, as well as at the very end. So kind of the, what's working well, even better if types of things we have at the end of those reports. So as the verbatim sometimes are those, gold dust that are so helpful to individuals as well. And then we also have, of course, a coaching cadre here at Holos that can do strategic coaching, not only as follow-ups to these diagnostics, but also supportive coaching in a variety of different ways, standalone too. So we can talk with you about any other questions you might have about that. So any questions about the coaching that goes with a 360 or with team effectiveness. No, pretty straightforward. So Neil, let's go ahead then to the last slide. Okay, and this compounding significant gains is a similar slide to what Neil shared in the keynote that he did on Tuesday. But if we're starting with authentic leadership, which of course is comprised of psychological safety and trust, right? We have to be someone who makes ourselves vulnerable in order to truly lead authentically. And so creating that environment enables others to do the same. So as an authentic leader, we are at our best, enabling others to be their best. And so having that type of environment, which, as you know, based on the poll, based on who I know you all to be, you know, we are creating an environment which is as safe as, you know, as important as it is to be physically safe. And in that way, we can then cast that net out and attract and retain the best and the brightest of all folks. So we have that cognitive and background diversity as well. And I think we also know about neural research where we know that, you know, we as humans it's more important to be in feeling safe because we are we further kind of are pushed away from danger because we're looking to survive. So threat is much more important to the human body than the attraction mechanism. So again, when we don't feel psychologically safe or physically safe, you know, the brain wants us to get away. So we're going to look for people being engaged, look for people feeling more, you know, wanting to stay, wanting to contribute when we have that type of environment, especially those who are different in some ways, leading to greater creativity, greater collaboration, self-discipline, and obviously that discretionary effort. Tom talked about that yesterday in his session. Leading, of course, productivity, adaptability, defense against disruption, and the ability to disrupt because we're using our creativity and unleashing that and enabling that, increasing profitability growth, and of course, the sustained success we're looking for. Any questions on that model? Okay, so then as we transition to the close, we've got some pricing information for you. And if you want to talk about partnering with a client you have or some other conversation, here's the information on the different diagnostics. So you can do a screenshot if you'd like.
Saying that we give you guys a 15% discount on these prices, so you can put that in as your margin. I mean, obviously you can mark them up as well, but we include a 15% discount for you guys as resellers. At the moment, it's a sort of manual process, so you need to let us know what you want to do. Daryl's already done it. But you need to tell us what it is, and we can set it up for you, or we can give you access to the back end and you can set it up. But in the fullness of time, there will be a full online ordering thing so that you can just set it up automatically.
Neil, Susan, quick question. Just in terms, is it possible to see sample reports for both of these?
See samples report. I do have one, and I was looking for it a moment ago, and I couldn't get hold of it. So
Okay.
Let me find it, and I feel a bit awkward sharing a real report with you. So let me find the sample reports, and I can share that with you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other?
Great, thanks. No, that's really clear, really helpful.
And if you want to, if you are going to go ahead with if you're interested in selling it to a client, we'll help you to do that and make sure that you're ready for that as well.